Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our PTM forum today. I am Trevor Weltman. I'm going to be your host for today's session. And the title of today's session is The Impact of Health and Hygiene on Post-COVID Competitiveness in Asia Pacific. To be honest, I am incredibly excited for today's session. It's because it's not only just the 1 hour that we're going to spend together. Actually, since July, with this incredible lineup of speakers who are joining me, we've been working hand in hand on this really wonderful report that we just put out about how competitiveness for destinations across the region may change as a result of COVID-19. And with that, we're going to be going into some pretty experimental topics today, or cutting edge topics at least, for travel and tourism. And I want to thank you all for joining us for this journey. So let me get set up on the screen. Before we jump into the topic though, I do want to invite you to visit our Crisis Resource Center, or our CRC here at PATA, to download this new report. So we've put into the slides a QR code. So if you're on your desktop and you have your mobile phone, you can go ahead and scan it, and it will take you to the website to download. And if not, we will also include the link in our post-webinar materials, as well as a link to a recording of this. So I'm going to leave this up for just 1 second. Again, you can take out your phone and you can scan it and be taken to the place where the report is on our CRC. So without further ado, I want to get into the first part of our webinar today, which is going to be a panel discussion with two of our speakers. So the subject or the topic of this panel is going to be the changing needs of travelers and residents. Joining us today are two leaders in the travel industry globally. We have Fabrizio Orlando, who's the Global Industry Relations Associate Director for TripAdvisor. And we have Olivier-Henri Biabot, who is the CEO of an interesting company called TCI Research. So I'll ask that both of our panelists turn on their cameras. And I will stop my screen share for a second. There we go. Let me stop that. Okay. Olivier, there we go. Okay, Fabrizio, you guys are still muted. I'll ask Fabrizio, you come off mute, then we'll go ahead and begin with you. Good.
Thank you, Trevor. Good morning, everyone. Here is a gloomy morning from London. I think you guys are probably a bit more further ahead in the day, and I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for the very nice introduction and for the invite, Trevor. My name is Fabrizio, and I lead the industry relations team at TripAdvisor. So we basically take care of all the relationship that we as a company have with the industry in general, both national and international organizations, making sure that we protect the brand of TripAdvisor. At the same time, we position TripAdvisor as a thought leader in the travel and tourism industry. And it was a great pleasure working with Trevor, Pata, Olivier, and all the other partners on this report. We really think there is a new approach to what we might expect in the future from travel and tourism, especially in the Asia Pacific region. So thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And thanks to you and to TripAdvisor for your willingness in participating in this report and starting to put out this kind of experimental information. We're really grateful to you for leading that, and to your organization as well. So to get into the panel, what's actually happening with health and hygiene and travelers? And what is TripAdvisor seeing in this regard?
Sure, it's a very good question. What we tried to do at TripAdvisor since day one of this pandemic was trying to understand what was going on in the world. We were trying to understand what consumers were feeling and thinking, what travelers especially were thinking and feeling in the beginning. What we did was analyzing our own search data, analyzing our on-site travel behavior, and of course, speaking with consumers. We ran a lot of surveys. And I think that after these first 6 months, pretty much of during and post pandemic era, we saw that a lot of governments, a lot of countries are now opening up their borders and reaccepting tourists from all over the world. And I think that this is giving us already some very interesting information. What we tried to do was pretty much support our partners, our owners and our travelers around the world. And this is why we were trying to analyze what was going on. And I think that if there is one key takeaway for me in this moment, which is, I would say, consistent around the world, both in terms of from where people are traveling and to where people are going, is that consumers want to feel safe wherever they go. This is the key priority for them, which makes, of course, total sense for us. And health and hygiene criteria are now dominating the way in which travelers are approaching the simple idea of traveling. They want to understand where they will feel safe wherever they go. And there are some very interesting data, especially when we look at Asia Pacific. We spoke, as I was saying before, we ran some survey, we spoke with consumers in Asia Pacific and everywhere in the world, and we saw that more than 70% of them told us that they are concerned on the way in which destinations are handling COVID-19 cases, so both infection and fatalities. We saw more than 72% of people telling us that it's very important also the way in which destinations are creating a culture of social responsibility to prevent the virus. They want to travel to destinations in which people are required to wear masks, for instance, in indoor places. They want to go to destinations in which self-quarantine is an important aspect as well.
Sure.
And they are also paying a lot of attention on the presence of businesses that have measures in place to prevent the spread of the virus. Overall, all those different data points tell us that it's very important that destinations and hotel owners and restaurant owners, attractions owners have clear health and safety precautions in place in their establishments, in their businesses. And I think this is the most interesting shift in consumer behavior. When we spoke with people in the past, we saw the price and location, for instance, when you look at accommodations, were the top two decision-making criteria for them. They wanted to pay the fair amount of price and they wanted to be in the most important location. What we saw now is that health and safety precautions in an accommodations are way more important. If you want data, we're talking about 72.8% of people that told us the most important thing when I look for accommodation is I want to feel safe. This place needs to have clear health and safety precautions in place. And when you look at price, it's less than 40% people that now say price is the most important criteria. A bit more than 45% say that location is important. Exclusive offers are not even cared in this moment by people. People want to feel safe. And we saw that 91% of consumers said that cleanliness is the main criteria when they choose accommodations. And everything that goes with that. So you have people that care about staff and guests wearing masks, for instance. They want to travel to destinations that, especially people from Asia Pacific, that will allow them to be open air, not surrounded by other people that can sort of self-isolate with their partners, with their friends, with their family, whoever they travel with. So I think that the most interesting shift that we saw in the industry in this moment is exactly this one. People are shifting from some sort of classic, I would say, decision-making criteria, price, location, offers into a new set of criteria, which is based on health, hygiene, and safety.
It would be an important shift if these just became more important relative to where they were in the past. But what you're sharing, it's not only have they become more important, but they've displaced those topmost criteria from the past. And I think that that's an important distinction. They're not just more important, they're becoming the most important. So with that, you know, I think it's important. And anybody can claim that something is a trend or that the data suggests. Where does TripAdvisor get this data from? How are you guys so confident that we can come out now and say that these are truly early trends and they're widespread?
What we did, and actually we were among, I think, the first companies to do that in our industry. Since day one, we started to understand, okay, what's going on now? What will go on in the future? And we based our research on a lot of different inputs. First thing first, we use our on-site behavior data. This means that when a consumer, when a traveler comes on our site, we monitor their path on our platform. And this is something that we were looking at first thing first. Okay, where do consumers go whenever they go on TripAdvisor? What are they looking at? What are the different points, different type of information that they're looking for? We were also monitoring consumer sentiment. We ran surveys every 2 weeks since the beginning of the pandemic, in which we were asking specific questions to our users, but also to people that were not users. So to track the difference between used travelers and people that are traveling probably a bit less. And what we did was also layering on top of that the
Sure.
difference we're seeing every 2-3 weeks when we're running the surveys. We, of course, selected some few destinations around the world, and we rerun the surveys always in the same destination, also to try to understand what's going on in the region as well. Asia Pacific, of course, was one of the key regions for us, along with Europe and the Americas. And this is why we feel kind of confident with our data, because we had a lot of validation across the past 6 months. And we also saw a lot of different trends in those months. And I think this is the most interesting thing. We saw some trends that are still valid after 6 months. And we saw trends that were emerging and now are probably a bit less important for people, which also gives us an idea of how to track in time those different sentiment that people have. And again, for us, it was critical to do this type of thinking because we serve two types of users. We serve our owners, which are restaurant owners, hotel owners, destinations, of course, and we want to make sure to provide them with the most accurate and up-to-date data that we have on our platform, because we understand that they need to plan ahead, of course, and try to understand how to get more diners, how to get more guests, how to get more travelers in destinations. And on the other end, we also wanted to serve our other key stakeholder, which are travelers, of course. So we wanted to understand what they were looking for in order for us to make the necessary shifts in our platform to make them feel safe. As we were saying before, safety is the key criteria for them. They want to feel safe, which we all want to feel safe, especially in this moment. So we wanted to make sure that we were there to make them feel at ease whenever they would feel ready to travel again. And whenever, of course, governments give us the okay to travel again.
So it's interesting to hear this because I think oftentimes people see a company like TripAdvisor as large, business as usual, just sort of assisting the industry. But with what you're sharing too, there's a learning happening for TripAdvisor, which is, okay, there's a big change in the industry. How do we respond to this in a way that's nimble and agile and change what we're doing to help our users? So what are some of those changes then? I mean, aside from surveys, aside from just, looking at the sentiment of, or the user behavior across the platform, are there other ways that you guys are trying to make this new health and hygiene a reality easier for businesses to showcase or easier for travelers to understand? What are some of the changes you guys are actually doing to act on these trends?
Sure. As I said, we focus on what was going on since day one of this pandemic. So in the beginning, we realized that the key issue for owners was cash flow. They were not making money, as simple as that. So we didn't want to take any money from them. So I think we learned step by step what to do. The first decision that we took was, okay, let's just freeze the membership fees for our owners because we don't want to take their money in a moment in which they're not making money. Secondly, we realized they needed data, they needed insights, they needed information. This is why we started running also surveys, because we said we don't want to give them just the site behavioral data, the traffic data we have on TripAdvisor. We want to share with them also what people are thinking in this moment. And it was at this stage that we realized the most important thing for people is safety, as we were saying before. So we launched an initiative that is called Travel Safe.
Okay.
And it's kind of a recent one. We launched that by the end of June. And what Travel Safe does is basically we allow registered owner on TripAdvisor totally for free to go on their listings and add safety measures that they have in place at their property. We put together a checklist working with the key national associations around the world, and owners have access to this checklist, and they can only very simply click on the different measures that they have in place in their hotel, for instance, in their restaurant, in their tour operator. And this will showcase on their listing page on TripAdvisor, along with a box in which they can write their commitment to safety, for instance, or what type of safety label that they have implemented in obtained for their property. And I think on one end, this helps owners because they can showcase in the moment in which people want to feel safe, what they're doing to keep people safe. And on the other end, of course, gives to travelers from everywhere in the world that want to feel safe, the opportunity of checking what properties are doing to keep them safe. And I think there has been a big success so far. We have more than 100,000 businesses around the world that have added their safety measures on TripAdvisor. And the click-through rates for those properties have increased by 16%, which means properties that have those measures in place on TripAdvisor are way more visited than properties that don't. And I was actually running some check the other day on the beginning of this week on Asia Pacific specifically, and we saw that properties in Asia that have implemented the travel safe measures on their TripAdvisor listings are recovering 3 times faster than all other properties in Asia Pacific. This means, again, people want to feel safe and people are looking to information that will make them feel safe whenever they will be choosing an accommodation or a destination.
I think this is really interesting. I think, again, by perception, from the outside looking in, having seen Travel Safe, it's really just a few more options on the profile. So it doesn't appear to be a massive change. But actually, to make any change to a platform the size of TripAdvisor, which there's few in the world, right? It is an enormous change to be able to roll it out with speed. So to me, that first underscores that there is definitely the trust and the confidence in the underlying data that this is a trend that's important to be able to muster the resources to deploy a change like that. But also from the business side, the B2B side, this is a relatively easy thing for them to implement if it's just going into the platform where they most likely already have a listing and to just select the options. This is particularly important, I think, to talk about because you're seeing the drastic increase in click-through rates for such a simple change for them to make, to log in, to fill out the information for something they're already doing offline, to increase their business. And I think that that's really unique. And as you said, you're seeing those trends actually take place with the people who adopt it, correct?
And I think you're totally right. I think that's the key point to touch. To attract new customers, to attract more customers and to go back to pre-pandemic level, hopefully, or in any case, to grow the levels of customers and guests that accommodations, restaurant, destinations especially have, they don't need to make huge changes. It's not about changing completely the business model. It's about doing some small changes that can make a big impression on customers. They want to feel safe. So let's showcase what you as a destination, you as an owner are doing to keep them safe. And again, it's about a checklist on TripAdvisor. It's about switching from a physical menu that everyone touches to a contactless menus, for instance, that we're offering again for free to our owners in this moment. And I think for destinations especially, it's a matter of understanding that in this moment, transparency, promoting good practices is key. People want to feel safe. I will not stress enough this point. People want to feel safe whenever they travel. And destinations need to understand this, need to promote safety for travelers in their destinations. And this will help them in capture interest and in convert this interest into sales eventually. You know? They need to adapt to what's going on in the market, but they also need to proactively shape the mindset of people in this moment, making them feel safe and making them understand why they can feel safe in a specific destination.
So to summarize this part, and Fabrizio, I'll ask that you go on mute for now as I go over to Olivier in a second, is really first, we have high confidence that consumer trends or sentiment has changed. We're seeing a prioritization of health and hygiene move up the list, and in some cases to the top of the list for the metrics or for the attitudes that people are using for their booking behavior, what they're actually paying attention to. Beyond that, there's this aspect of businesses who are able to communicate those changes, not just make the health and hygiene changes, but those early on, at least now in the pandemic, who are able to communicate those changes, they are seeing a faster recovery globally based on the TripAdvisor data, but in particular in Asia Pacific where the click-through rates are higher. We'll come back to some of these themes in a minute, but before we do, I want to head over to Olivier. Olivier, could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Hi, Trevor. It's always a pleasure to partner with Pata and you. And Fabrizio, you mentioned the London weather, but come in Brussels and experience what a horrible weather can be. It is super rainy. But anyway, yes, I'm a CEO of TCI Research. So TCI is a travel data intelligence agency, which is focusing mostly on measuring standard metrics for visitor experiences. destination reputation, resident sentiment, and we actually combine the two, let's say the best from the classic surveys and the big data analytics. And we've been awarded by UNW a few years ago for a global program called TravelSat, which is a standard platform and analytic platform for destinations.
Thank you. Why we wanted to engage with TCI for this particular report was something unique that you guys not only pay attention to, but that I believe and Pata believes you do a very good job of integrating into the larger conversations in travel and tourism. And that has to do with the resident sentiment. So already in our conversation with Fabrizio, we focused on the travel and tourism businesses and the travelers or the consumers themselves. But before the pandemic, there was already a robust global conversation happening about travel and tourism. And during the pandemic, there's a conversation happening about what are the net benefits? How do people think about tourism in different locations? And, just asking bluntly, Olivier, how are locals in Asia right now feeling about travel and tourism generally? Are you seeing changes in how they feel from pre-pandemic? Is it positive? Is it negative? What are the residents here saying?
Yeah, how do they feel? It's obviously a very important question, and I will develop on that. But I have to say they are feeling way better than expected. We had some good elements, good surprises, and good positive news from the survey. Because as you say, during the peak of the pandemic, and especially in March and April, we've been capturing so many social listening data about tensions. Tourists, pointed out as the cause of everything, and resident protests or specific bans on specific types of travelers. We've seen here in Europe a lot of let's say conversations around Asian visitors, kind of phobia, and European visitors in the US also, which have been banned. So what we wanted to do is to sort of objectivize the situation through a survey, a representative survey. So we have decided to do this 3,000 interviews about how residents are feeling about tourism development in their own community, and to do it in a global way and making comparisons. And so we have focused that on 6 iconic cities across Asia and Pacific. And the results, as I said, were actually are way better than expected. Quite positive in absolute value, also positive compared to other regions. And so let me maybe share a few takeaways and facts and figures. Today, as we speak, we are having 73% of residents across those 6 iconic cities who are saying that their city should continue promoting. It's 3 points above the global average. We have 77% of residents in Asia saying that they are still very proud to see tourists and visitors coming from far to visit their city, their community. It's two points above the global average. We have 64% who would like to be more involved in tourism in the future. It's 8 points above the global average. We have 3 out of 10 who agree to say that tourism today needs financial support to help the local economy recover. It's 6 points above the average. And we have also 76% who believe that their city has proper sanitary rules to welcome visitors in good conditions. And it's 12 points above the average. And one particular good news, and I'm not going to go through all the results, I can only encourage people to download the report and read it. But we are seeing that tourism promoters in Asia today among residents are younger than average and younger than in other regions in the world, which is a very good sign, because the young people are also the future of tourism. So there is less than 4% of tourism phobiacs, which we call them as people who are rejecting tourism and saying, we have enough, we don't want tourism anymore. And 4% is really a low score. It's 1 point below the global norm. So the picture overall is reassuring, and we have in the survey more positive than negative news. But this said, people seems to be, on the other hand, quite careful about the short term.
Yeah.
We have about 70% of the residents who are saying they are happy with tourism. They're happy to welcome tourism back. But by the end of the year, 70% say maybe we should limit a bit the number of international visitors in our city. And also this positive attitude today might be a bit challenged as soon as flows of tourism are going to come back in their city, because it will depend on how far they will respect the rule and how far, you know, all these new experience of COVID-19 tourism at destination will be managed, and how, you know, the first, as soon as first physical interactions between tourists and residents, how are they, you know, how will it influence that in the future? We are obviously going to track that, but so far so good.
I guess to pick on that a little bit. So right now it's positive. People are open. It sounds like to tourism coming back. They want to support the industry, and by and large, as you said, in absolute terms, positive, but also in relative terms to other regions, positive. Where or how does health and hygiene fit into this local sentiment? Are you guys tracking what residents think about health and hygiene? Is that an important consideration for them, or how does that play into this?
Sure. And I realize when you ask the question that maybe many DMOs or attractions who are listening are just asking, well, you know, their priority, my priority as a destination is really to make people come back. So why should I care about, you know, what locals are thinking about health and hygiene?
It could be
not going to make, it's not a seller, you know.
Sanitation, or that's the Ministry of
yeah,
Health.
so I can imagine that probably this is not the top priority in DMO's mind, but let me put that into broader context. As you were saying, you know, before the pandemic, before that, why do you ask people about the tourism impact in their own city? And, you know, is tourism good for my city? Is it good for my daily life? Before the COVID-19, we already measured that there were growing sentiment about over-tourism and related issues to garbage management, environmental impact, things about pollution, noise, you know, and together with fly shame, there were a growing resentment about tourism is not good for the environment and cleanliness. So it was already part of their main concern.
Sure.
And today, as for many other trends, the COVID-19 is just amplifying that concern. The only thing is today, maybe there is less fears around too many people in my place, but there are fears about people too close to each other. So the concept of, there is no over-tourism anymore right now, which maybe is a bit a pity, if I can say, but the overall concept of crowd management and related environmental impact is changing, and now including that risk of sanitary potential problems if things are not managed anymore. So it's less a question of number, it's more a question of quality of interactions and respecting the rules. And so as a result, when you ask today in a survey Asian communities about tourism impact, how they feel about it, if you look at is it positive or negative for the local economy, for the infrastructure, for the quality of life, etc. In the top of positive impact, we still have the local economy impact as a very high, yep, as well as the atmosphere. People are missing a bit the atmosphere from visitors, but at the bottom of the list as main negative impact, just by chance, we are seeing and measuring the cleanliness of public spaces as the one generating the most negative impact, and the protection of the environment. And when we ask Asian residents about those saying tourism is generating problems in their city, we ask the question on what are the main problems that tourism is generating. And on top of the list, we have things around traffic issues and crowding, but we see the problems of cleanliness and waste management in the third, as a third top criteria listed. So way above problems of disrespect, of housing prices increases, or depopulation due to Airbnb and stuff like that. So pollution, cleanliness is really now a growing concern among that. So we are seeing a major shift in the sentiment in favor of, let's say, sustainability at large, environment, social impact, sanitary impact. And so there's no point today for us to try to convince residents that tourism is good for the economy. Everybody knows that, including the 4% of tourism phobic, a majority of them totally understand that tourism is good for the economy, but now the focus is more to take care about ensuring the best health and hygiene and environmental impact from tourism, because it's a way to take care about people, and people are the faces of destinations.
I mean, I think this last point is as much of a game changer as what Fabrizio shared before. It's not just, you know, it's accepted that these other things are still important. Price, you know, location, etc. Those things are still important, but this is not only grown in importance, these are becoming primary importance to the travelers. And from what you're sharing, there's a big shift in the local sentiment. We accept, or even the least positive or the most negative people about tourism say, oh, we accept what the benefits are, but we know that there's these other downsides. So here's the things that we need to improve or that we are paying attention to for tourism. And I think that's a unique insight. And I also think it's something that's not part of the current sort of DMO local conversation, at least in many of the destinations that we speak with. But again, I think to your brilliant point a minute ago, that as a DMO, if I'm listening to this, or as a major employer, tourism employer in a destination, why do I care? That's not really my remit. We need to focus on promoting. We need to focus on making sure that we have the right products, the right image. Why do we care about this health and hygiene? So what is the link between local sentiment then, if we're going to invest in improving that, and the attractiveness of the destination? How do we make that link? Where do we see that link come through?
Yeah, there are actually two major links and impact. We know that the residents' attitude will impact two things. First of all, the visitor experience and satisfaction, and of course also the destination reputation. We are living in a social world. So first, each time we measure the impact and what drives satisfaction of visitors whilst at destination, we always look at our data. We look at, you know, is it food, is it accommodation, is it safety, transport? Yeah. And we always find local attitudes, local friendliness or residence friendliness as among the top 3 major criteria influencing visitor satisfaction and propensity to recommend the destination. So it's in many destinations, local attitudes are more influential than shopping or accommodation quality or cultural activities. So you can, as a DMO, as a destination, you can offer the best quality of food, the best diverse attractions, the best transportation infrastructure. But if your residents are not welcoming your visitors in a proper way, you cannot be competitive. So, and you know, I'm sure, Trevor, if you think about your top best memorable experience of traveling in the past, thinking about the one who are really being kind of a life-changing type of experiences, they will always imply interaction or immersive experiences with you know, local communities. And this has made, by the way, success of companies like Airbnb. So improving resident attitude will massively impact your competitiveness, because 40% of first-time visitors in Asia choose a destination from others' experiences, friends and relatives, or maybe comments on TripAdvisor. And this experience is driven #1 by local attitudes. And then the reputation is absolutely critical. We have seen through the crisis, and we know that in even before that, with you know, social context, political context, or sometimes climate change or safety and terrorism threats and so on, we know 50% of decision-making for choosing destination is driven by non-tourism issues. And today, sanitary is one of it. So if residents are not happy and if they start protesting, you see it on CNN, you see it in all social conversations. And so basically, if they're not happy, it is known. And so you are losing your competitiveness in terms of reputation. I mean, who is going to choose a destination where you know you have a chance that your car is maybe recovered by graffiti saying, keep your virus at home? We have that kind of experience here in France. So it impacts the reputation so much. So there is an obvious parallel to make. with the safety and terrorism threats as we used to have before, and also all the protests in Barcelona, for example, about over-tourism. This is known. So in terms of when you have to choose a destination, this is part of the engine of decision-making process. And so reputation, visitor experience, the link is just major.
I wanna push on this a little bit for our last couple minutes, and that's, when somebody recovers from social unrest or environmental issues in their destination, they don't promote it by just showing the opposite. If you suffered a terrorism attack, God forbid, the destination recovery images do not feature the strength capability in terms of force of that destination, okay? They focus on other things. However, with tourism recovery, as one of the panelists from a previous webinar, Damien Cook of eTourism Frontier showed, we still, though, are showing very heavily in recovery from COVID, the wearing of face masks and other health and hygiene things. So in terms of promoting the destination, perhaps externally, those things need to be shown, but not overly done. How, though, to communicate that to your residents? Because I think, Olivier, what I would like to hear is, how do the residents know that tourism is helping with some of these things, these enhanced health and hygiene measures? How can destination managers communicate that to the residents, that no, tourism is helping us either make these investments or making these changes, which creates that sort of virtuous cycle of what the residents want, what the tourists want, health and hygiene, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, sure. So health and hygiene, again, are quite difficult to promote. Nobody can dream about that. Nobody.
Right.
So so the challenge is to how to promote that as a DMO, and I will maybe come back to that after. But again, this health and hygiene have become really sort of the piece of the total tourism ecosystem. I said this is number one reason why, or one of the main reasons or concerns among, how to make residents happy with tourism, especially tourism in this COVID-19 era. So that's the number one concern. So, for them, this is the best way to protect the faces of your destination. And it's also, as I said, a very important driver of satisfaction. I mentioned residents' attitudes as being number one. If you look at the ranking of which is massively influencing destinations' experiences, among the top 5 for all markets, all destinations, we measure that cleanliness environment is also playing a major role in shaping good experiences. So it means basically, if you're clean, you can justify sometimes very high price. We have here in Europe the example of Nordic destinations. They are not cheap. It's pretty expensive, but because they manage in such a sustainable way, they are really leading the race globally in sustainability, in cleanliness, in social impact, that basically you are ready to pay the price. And at the end of the day, the value for money perception, even if it's expensive, you are happy to pay the price. So this is the piece that is kind of licking the whole. The challenge about promoting it, it's probably something that, again, cannot make people dream. You're not going to attract people or making them dream, talking about health and hygiene. So it's about, the right mix on what you promote to make people dream, and how you act on your product as a destination, on your hotel, on your museum, to improve the product experience more than just maybe marketing it. Even if we are seeing some very good database evidence that when a country is promoting today around new sanitary protocols, sometimes with labels, certification, like Portugal, for example, we're seeing the curve or their attractiveness or booking going up. So it's part of that, but you cannot, of course, only focusing too much on that, because one of the problem is making people dream about a potential experience with so many constraints. And, travel it's about exploration and sometimes leaving things you have not planned. So it's finding the right balance between keeping the dream and acting on the experience. And the experience will make the dream high because it would go through word of mouth and through fueling the reputation by peer-to-peer, by the peer-to-peer channel.
Well, I think you hit on a very important point, and it's actually the perfect segue to the next section. And what that is health and hygiene is becoming more important, or in some cases, the most important. But it is still ultimately one piece of the larger tourism composition that makes a destination either attractive or unattractive. It could be a leading characteristic, or it could be a complementary characteristic to other leading characteristics. However, it's an important component, and it's actually always been an important component, but now it's growing in its importance. So with that, what I'm going to ask is I'll say thank you to both of our panelists for your insights thus far. I'll ask that you both go off camera and off microphone, and we'll come back to you at the end for your closing remarks. And then to everybody else, I'm going to just do a little technical screen share, and I'm going to introduce our next speaker. So unfortunately, because of time zones, two of our speakers today and two of our contributors to the report are based on the East Coast in the US. So unfortunately, this is very early morning for them. However, because their contributions are so valuable and also critical to this overall conversation of the role of health and hygiene in destination competitiveness, we did ask them to pre-record videos that introduce first who they are and their organizations, and second, the indexes that they represent and how those indexes for either competitiveness or global health shape this conversation for what we as tourism practitioners should be doing going forward. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Again, desktop one, share, okay. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker. Let me go off video, just 1 second. Okay. So, if it will let me share. Okay, good. So our next presentation is actually going to be a micro keynote video. And that is going to be coming from a gentleman by the name of Maksim Soshkin. Maksim is a research and analysis specialist for aerospace, aviation, travel, and tourism for the World Economic Forum. I wish he was with us here today on call, because I really want to take the opportunity to thank him and also thank his colleagues at the forum. When we first approached the forum about working on this report and it sort of being experimental, we want to do, change some of your metrics from before and see how they impact competitiveness. They just said yes. They just said, yeah, oh, that's a great idea. We really like to push the ideas and test things in the market to see what people are thinking and to put out big ideas. And I know I found that very inspiring, and different people on our team found that very inspiring too. So a great thanks to the forum and in general, and Maksim in particular, for their contributions to our report. So as shared, I'm going to head over to a video now of Maksim speaking and talking about tourism competitiveness and their index.
Hello everyone, my name is Maksim Soshkin and I'm part of the World Economic Forum's Aviation, Travel and Tourism team, and lead on the Forum's 2019 Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Index, or TCI. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'd like to thank Paddock for making us part of this important discussion. Published biannually, the TCI benchmarks the travel and tourism competitiveness of 140 economies and measures the set of factors and policies that enable the sustainable development of the travel and tourism sector. The index provides unique insights into the strengths and challenge areas of each country to enhance its industry competitiveness, and provides a framework for multi-stakeholder dialogue at the country level to formulate appropriate policies and actions. The index consists of 4 sub-indexes and 14 pillars. The first sub-index is enabling environment, which captures the general conditions necessary for operating in a country, i.e. business environment, health and hygiene, and ICT readiness. The travel and tourism and enabling conditions sub-index captures specific policies or strategic aspects that impact the travel and tourism industry more directly, such as international openness and price competitiveness. The infrastructure sub-index looks at the availability and quality of physical infrastructure, ranging from airports to roads and accommodations. And lastly, but not least, The natural and cultural resources sub-index captures the principal reasons for travel, with a focus on the wealth of a nation's cultural and natural resources. In the context of COVID-19, the idea is that the more competitive a travel and tourism economy is, the better position it is for recovery and post-COVID growth. Therefore, the TCI can act as a tool to better understand what competitiveness factors might boost or challenge travel and tourism recovery within countries, informing recovery strategies. So, for instance, for the impact of health and hygiene report, we compared the health and hygiene pillar scores of Asia-Pacific economies with their overall travel and tourism competitiveness to identify the readiness of countries to deal with the growing role of health, safety, and travel decisions. We found that the region is generally very competitive, with especially rich natural and cultural resources. Moreover, more developed economies like Japan and South Korea also have above average levels of health and hygiene infrastructure, which may indicate that they are in a position to win travel and tourism market share in the future. And while results do vary by country, we also found that on average, Asia-Pacific economies actually lag behind similarly competitive economies when it comes to health and hygiene infrastructure. As a result, if we look at the scenario where global travel resumes, but health safety is more important than ever, the region may face a challenge in competing with other tourist hotspots like Europe. Of course, this does not consider the impact of health policy decisions or other factors on how COVID has spread, so it definitely does not tell the whole story. In the end, the TCI looks at everything from health and security to infrastructure and natural resources, because a competitive travel and tourism economy is dependent on all of these interconnected areas, which reinforces how crucial multi-stakeholder cooperation is for building a successful travel and tourism destination. Going forward, we're working with collaborators like PATA to make sustainability a greater component of our indexes, because as before the current crisis, sustainability on an economic, social, and environmental level is probably the greatest long-term competitiveness and resilience challenge that the travel and tourism sector faces.
Okay. So let me turn my video back on. Okay. Well, again, unfortunately, he's not here to join us for the webinar, but thank you very much, Maksim, for the great synopsis video. It's actually a perfect synopsis of the work we did together, and in such a short few minutes as well, to capture it all. Very well done. Essentially, again, just to repeat some of what Maksim shared, this report is exploratory in nature. We took the previously identified competitive characteristics of a destination that WEF and that others have put, that the forum and others have put together when analyzing which destinations are the most competitive. And we just did a simple thought experiment based on the trends that both Fabrizio and Olivier have already shared. What if health and hygiene, everything else equal, if health and hygiene became more important? So we doubled that weighting and then analyzed how that compared to destinations within the region, what that growth looked like, and then also how that compared to destinations around the world. The idea was to create something that can spur action, to say, okay, Asia Pacific is the second most competitive destination or region in the world based on last year's analysis and previous year's analysis. But will this hold to the future? Can we arm ourselves with more information? Can we give our businesses and our governments more information to help them be more competitive into the future? So ultimately, what this analysis showed is, yes, Asia Pacific will remain competitive, but there are some needs, particularly in health and hygiene, and some risks that could impact that competitiveness. Ultimately, however, in order for this health and hygiene to come to life, there's going to have to be some very strong cross-sectoral work, not only between the tourism businesses and the DMOs themselves, but the overall public health and multi-ministerial work that will have to happen between different government agencies and the private sector, the education sector, etc. Because of that, we wanted to engage another entity in this report, which is why we reached out to the Nuclear Threat Initiative, who's one of the co-founders behind the Global Health Security Index, which they co-founded with The Economist and with Johns Hopkins University. For that, we were in touch with Jessica, who also is not going to be able to be with us today. But they're an index that looks at overall health security and pandemic preparedness for destinations around the world. And they're very well placed to comment on how these different entities, these different sectors can work together in driving real change as regards public health and overall safety. Again, as Jessica couldn't join us today, we had her pre-record a micro keynote, and I will go ahead and share that now before we return to our panelists for their final thoughts of the day. So I'm going to have to exit Zoom real quickly, come here, or exit Keynote and go over to the screen. So I hope you guys can still see, and I'm going to go ahead and play Jessica's video.
I'm Jessica Bell, a Senior Program Officer for Global Biological Policy and Programs at the Nuclear Threat Initiative and one of the co-leads of the Global Health Security Index. In October 2019, NTI and Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security teamed up with the Economist Intelligence Unit to produce the Global Health Security Index, the first comprehensive assessment of global health security capabilities in 195 countries. The purpose of the index is to identify very clearly and transparently the gaps in global capability to stop and mitigate high consequence biological events and motivate accountability for filling these gaps. And what we found is that no country, regardless of income level, is fully prepared. In fact, most countries have major gaps across all categories assessed in the index. Overall, the GHS index finds significant weaknesses in countries' abilities to prevent, detect, and respond to health emergencies. It also finds major gaps in health systems and vulnerabilities to political, socioeconomic, and environmental risks that can often confound outbreak preparedness and response. By clearly highlighting gaps in a country's health security capabilities, our aim is to stimulate political will, create accountability, and encourage leaders to prioritize health security. This includes increasing international financing to fill these gaps and motivating countries to address shortcomings within their own national level health security capabilities. The COVID-19 pandemic may have caught governments by surprise, but medical and public health communities have long warned of the potential for a high consequence pandemic. And as we've seen with COVID, countries with robust capacities for preventing, detecting, and responding to outbreaks can avert many of the social, political, economic, and health system costs of such crises. During the years to come, countries will undoubtedly undergo national level reviews to understand how their capabilities were used, and in many instances not used or not fully developed. And national level and economic security will continue to be adversely affected until national leaders change course. Global health security is only as strong as the weakest link, and health security must be a national priority. All countries must be honest and open with their neighbors on these strengths and weaknesses. When looking at the COVID-19 pandemic as a test case, the GHS index remains highly relevant. And going forward, the index will also look at a new as well as stronger metrics about additional capacities, such as supply chains and better understanding of national leadership. The strength of a country's leadership and the confidence of its people in their government and in their leaders is just as important, if not more important, than technical capacities. Health security must be a global and collective responsibility, and this requires partners across travel, trade, health, and agriculture to engage. I'd like to thank the Pacific Asia Travel Association for inviting me to participate in this panel and the other panelists for their comments. Recognizing this is a pre-recorded session, I'm open to follow-up questions via ghsindex.org website, and thank you for your time.
Great. Let me go back to sharing my screen. Okay, thank you very much, Jessica. What I really take away every time I speak with her is the fact that even though when we talk about travel, we often talk about it being, location-based, local, at the destination. In terms of public health and safety, these are mostly begin at the national level and then filter their way down. In essence, the complexity behind bringing these changes and enacting positive health and hygiene and safety for our destinations is really complex across the government and the private sector, and basically within the entire country, not only in a single location. So thank you very much, Jessica, for that really strong video, as well as your contributions and the contributions of your organization to our report. With that, with the remaining couple minutes of our webinar, I want to return back to our panelists who are with us, and I want to get their key takeaways. And in essence, I'm going to have Fabrizio and Olivier, please come back on, and we'll start with you again, Fabrizio, so you can unmute. I'll come back on video as well, and I'll stop sharing my screen so it's easier for everybody to see. So with that, in terms of a key takeaway, I wrote down a question, and I'm going to read it for our members here on call, for our audience. In one sentence or in one takeaway, if you were a destination manager, what is the main takeaway you should have from today's webinar?
Yeah, I think I'll use probably slightly more than one sentence, but I think it's important. It's very important. And I think I'll base my final sentence on some data as well. We saw then more than 2/3 of people telling us that they are doing in this moment as well, more research than they were doing before COVID-19, whenever they want to travel. And almost 70% of them told us, I will not travel until I see physical changes that will make me feel safe. This is very important. I think this is mirrored also in their approach. I was speaking before of the 16% higher click-through rate on properties with travel safe measures on TripAdvisor. I was saying in Asia Pacific, those properties are recovering 3 times faster than other properties. This is clear. People want to feel safe. At the same time, they act as they want to feel safe. And I think that this gives us the perfect segue to the most important thing, the key takeaway of today, which is everyone from destinations manager, government officials, hospitality, business owners in general, they have to understand that prioritizing health and safety practices isn't just the right thing to do, but it's actually the key to giving travelers confidence to travel again. This means that destinations and business markets need to not only do what they're doing. Olivier was saying before, this is not the health and safety, cleanliness are not the dreamy factors that will push you in a destination. This is true. Of course it's true. But on the other end, and they are also a cost, of course, and we're aware of that. But I think that health and safety, cleanliness are in this moment value proposition. They are unique selling points for destinations. They need to do something about that, but not only do that, also communicate in the right way everything that they're doing to keep travelers safe. These are priorities now. And I think that demand will only rebound when destinations manager will make traveler safety their highest priority. The entire industry needs to make traveler safety the highest priority and the global norm, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was maybe 3 sentences, but they were very valuable. Thank you very much, Fabrizio. Over to you, Olivier. Same question. If you were a destination manager or a business owner on call, what's the key takeaway for you in today's webinar?
Yeah, I would say probably it would be the right time to redefine the concept of ROI, so return on investment analysis. As far as we know, that at least, depending on markets and destinations, but at least the visitor experience is impacting or is more efficient 3 to 5 times more than advertising. It's time to redefine the ROI and having a very clear vision on your tactical versus strategic dollar spends. I think one tactical dollar spend in a short-term digital campaign will surely attract at least 1 visitor back tomorrow, but one strategic dollar spent to improve health and hygiene, so residents and visitors can live immersive experience again in good conditions. This particular $1 spent in the long term will certainly attract way more than one visitor tomorrow. So maybe not tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow, but the whole concept of ROI to me is quite kind of needs to be reshaped in this COVID-19 era.
Great. Thank you both for your time today. As I shared early on at the outset, since we started speaking regularly for the purpose of this report back in July, I've been through these conversations with both of you many times, and yet even today with just this final phrasing from both of you, I actually have a new takeaway as well. So with that, I want to thank all of our attendees and all of our contributors for coming today. As we shared earlier in the chat, we've given links to our two speakers who were not able to be here today, as well as to the report. We highly encourage everybody to please go and download the report and read it in whole. If you're a tourism business, this can give you the kind of tools to seek out and speak to other businesses to see how you can work together for the sake of your destination, how you can engage your local government with these important topics. If you're a government leader in your destination, this report will give you some of the insight, as Olivier just said, to start looking at how you're spending those tactical and those strategic dollars, where you're thinking about making these early investments for quick wins in the short term for recovery, but also that long-term positioning that Fabrizio talked about going forward. So with that, thank you everybody for joining our session today. We will send a follow-up email with a link to the recording as well as some of the links mentioned here. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend. Thank you.